A spray of muddy water shot into the air and crashed down, drenching an old, frail woman from head to toe. Her basket of vegetables tumbled into the dirt. She gasped, shivering, as the stench of gutter water clung to her clothes. At the wheel sat Dorothy Cape, the billionaire's only daughter. Instead of guilt, she let out a sharp, echoing laugh that turned heads. She pulled out her phone, zooming in on the poor woman like she was entertainment. "Look at you," Dorothy sneered, "walking like you own the road. Next time, stay in your lane. This space is for rich people, not beggars." The old woman's lips trembled as tears mixed with the mud, but Dorothy revved her engine, still recording, still mocking. Subscribe and watch till the end, beloved, and see what happens next. It will definitely shock you. It was one of those chilly afternoons in June when the sky looked like it was in a bad mood. Outskirts of the city, dusty roads, noisy trucks, and the never-ending drama of road construction. Potholes had turned into little swimming pools filled with brown, stinking water. Slowly, an old woman made her way along the roadside. She wasn't rushing. Her legs were weak, and her wooden walking stick tapped the ground as if announcing her every step. She wore a once cream wrapper that had clearly retired years ago, and a headscarf that struggled to hide her silver-grey hair. She looked fragile, but her careful steps showed one thing. She was determined not to fall into the mess of mud and dirty water. Meanwhile, racing down the same road came a spotless black Range Rover with tinted glass. Behind the wheel was the city's spoiled princess, Dorothy Cape, the only daughter of billionaire tycoon Chief Cape Sammy. If money had a surname, it would probably be Cape. Banks, oil companies, hotels, you name it, her father owned it. And Dorothy? She was the type who thought the world was just one giant runway designed for her entertainment. She spotted the old woman struggling by the roadside and smirked. Oh, look at her, trying so hard not to get dirty. How cute. She muttered with sarcasm dripping from her lips. Then the idea hit her. An evil grin spread across her face as she pressed her foot harder on the accelerator. Swoosh! She drove straight into the biggest puddle nearby. Water and mud flew into the air like fireworks, landing squarely on the poor woman. Splash! In seconds, the woman's wrapper, headscarf, and even her walking stick were dripping wet, stained with filth. She froze, shocked, staring at herself like life had just played the dirtiest prank. And Dorothy? She pulled over, rolled down her tinted window and laughed like she had just won an Oscar for Best Villain. "Oh my God, look at you!" she shouted, clapping her hands. "A muddy queen. Who told you to walk on my road, huh? Next time, stick to your lane. Roads are for cars, not for broke old villagers." The old woman turned her head slowly and looked at her with tired, tearful eyes. She didn't say a word, just stood there, shivering, as tears mixed with the dirty water on her wrinkled face. But Dorothy Cape wasn't done. No, humiliation wasn't complete until it was posted online. She pulled out her shiny iPhone and started recording. "Guys, look at this," she giggled, pointing her camera at the old woman. "This is what happens when the poor think they can share the road with the rich. I should actually thank her. This is the funniest thing I've seen all week." Passers-by saw what happened, but nobody dared to speak. Everyone knew her father's name was heavier than the law. Cross Dorothy Cape, and you might as well pack your bags and leave the city. The old woman bent down, picked up her stick from the mud, shook her head, and walked away slowly. She didn't argue. She didn't curse. She didn't even glance back again. Dorothy, still laughing, called her best friend immediately. "Clara, babe, you won't believe what just happened. I saw this tired, ancient-looking woman walking on the road, and guess what? I turned her into a mud statue." "Dorothy, you're so bad," Clara said, half laughing. "Bad, please, I'm a legend. You should have seen her face, like a confused goat in the rain. I recorded everything. Wait till I send it to the group. We're going to laugh all night." And she did. Later that day, Dorothy was at an expensive restaurant with her friends, sipping champagne and shopping online while showing them the video. They all laughed until their stomachs hurt. By evening, she was back at her father's mansion. 20 bedrooms, a private pool bigger than some public schools, and a garden where the flowers probably cost more than the average man's yearly salary. Maids hurried to take her bags, while chefs prepared her dinner. At the dining table, her father, Chief Cape, was finishing his meal. He wiped his mouth and looked at her. "Dorothy, I'm leaving for London tomorrow morning," he said in his deep, commanding voice. "Business meetings. I'll be gone 3 days. Don't throw any wild parties and don't finish your monthly allowance in 1 week." Dorothy chuckled, tossing her long hair. "Daddy, please, with all the money you've made, I could spend my whole life shopping and it still won't finish. Relax." Chief Cape gave her a small smile, unaware of the kind of disgrace his daughter had caused earlier that day. Dorothy just sat back, smug, replaying the video of the old woman in her head. To her it was just another funny moment. Little did she know, the story was far from over. The next morning, Dorothy Cape was still buried under her silk duvet, sleeping like life was nothing but a luxury holiday. At exactly 10 a.m., her phone rang loudly beside her. She groaned, turned to the side, and picked it up without even opening her eyes. "Hello," she muttered in her lazy, spoiled tone. "Dorothy, wake up! Turn on the news right now!" It was her father's voice, Cape Sammy, and he didn't sound calm. She sat up, frowning. "Papa, what's wrong? Aren't you in London enjoying your business trip?" "Just turn on the news, Channel 7 now," he barked. Dorothy rolled her eyes, grabbed the remote and turned on the flat-screen TV mounted on her golden-painted wall. What she saw made her jaw drop. Breaking news. Billionaire Sammy Cape loses everything in massive fraud. The TV anchor's voice carried the kind of excitement newscasters get when tragedy falls on the mighty. Business mogul Cape Sammy, once ranked among the wealthiest men in Africa, has lost his entire empire overnight. Reports confirm he invested 100% of his fortune into Harrison and Associates, a London-based firm, which has now vanished with billions of dollars belonging to African investors. Dorothy's hands trembled so badly that the remote slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. This has to be fake news," she whispered, shaking her head. Right then her phone rang again. "Papa," she answered quickly, her voice cracking. "Papa, please tell me this is some kind of sick joke. Tell me it's not true." Sammy Cape sighed, his voice heavy. "Dorothy, it's all gone. Every single thing. The oil blocks, the banks, the estates, even the private jets. I mortgaged everything trying to grow our wealth. I thought I was making us untouchable, but instead I dragged us into ruin. I can't even pay for my hotel in London." Dorothy gasped as though someone had slapped her across the face. But what about the house, my cars, the money in our accounts?" "The banks are moving in already," Sammy said bitterly. "By now they're probably standing in front of the mansion. Pack whatever you can carry, child. Forget the rest. It's over." "Over?" Dorothy repeated, stunned. "Papa, we're the Capes. Nothing is supposed to be over for us." But when she rushed to the window, her worst nightmare stood in her driveway. Police cars, black SUVs with bank logos, and men in stiff suits holding papers like execution warrants. They were pointing at the mansion, at the cars, even at the swimming pool, as if they already owned it all. Her father hadn't exaggerated. Within 2 hours, the fairy tale life of Dorothy Cape crumbled like a cheap biscuit. Bank officials knocked on her door and delivered the final blow with zero sympathy. "Miss Cape, you have 30 minutes to pack up personal items. Clothes, toiletries, nothing more. Jewelry, designer bags, electronics, those are all company assets. They remain here." Dorothy blinked at them in disbelief. "Excuse me, this is my house, my clothes, my things." "Correction." One of the officials cut her off, voice flat. "This property now belongs to Trust Bank of Nigeria. Please cooperate or we'll have to remove you." Reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. She had no choice. For the first time in her 22 years of luxury, Dorothy Cape, the princess who once bathed in wealth, dragged a tiny travel bag across marble floors that were no longer hers. She tried to sneak some gold jewelry into the bag, but the officials quickly pulled it out. "Assets, Miss Cape. Those stay here." When she finally walked out of the house, her expensive heels clicking on the pavement, the guards didn't salute her. The drivers didn't rush to open doors. The maids didn't bow. Nobody cared. She was just another evicted girl with nothing but a bag in her hand. She tried calling her friends, the same ones who used to fight for a seat next to her at dinner parties. None of them picked up. Finally, Vera, her so-called best friend, answered. "Vera, thank God. I need a place to stay just for a while, please." But Vera cut her off. "Dorothy, my parents said it's not good for our reputation to associate with you anymore. I'm sorry, I can't help you." The line went dead. One by one, the rest gave her the same excuse. Suddenly, the same people who had once laughed at her mean jokes and tagged along to luxury vacations treated her like she was carrying a contagious disease. Dorothy Cape stood in the street, mascara running down her cheeks, hair in disarray, clutching her single bag. The billionaire's daughter, who once believed money could never finish, now had nothing. No home, no friends, no wealth. For the first time in her life, Dorothy Cape was poor. That night, Dorothy Cape, once the darling of the rich kids' club, found herself shivering behind a shopping mall like a stray cat. She wrapped her thin jacket around her body, but the night breeze cut through it like knives. The same girl who used to complain when her AC was too cold was now sleeping on bare concrete. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a princess. She felt disposable. By morning, her stomach was crying louder than she was. No food, no water, just shame. She dragged herself through the streets, hair messy, face swollen from tears, hoping somebody, anybody, would recognize her and help. She tried. Oh, she tried. She went to some of the drivers, maids and guards who once worked for the Cape Mansion. She thought they would welcome her like family. Instead, doors slammed in her face. "Sorry, madam. Times are hard. Please, don't bring your bad luck here." They all had excuses. To them, Dorothy was no longer a boss's daughter. She was just another burden. On the third day, Dorothy sat on the dirty pavement outside a noisy market, her bones aching, her pride crushed. She looked like she had been dragged through a gutter and left to dry. Shoppers passed by, wrinkling their noses. Some even whispered, "Isn't that Cape Sammy's daughter? My God, look at her now." Dorothy kept her head down. Then a voice broke through the noise. "Dorothy? Dorothy Cape, is that really you?" She looked up slowly. Standing there, holding a bag of vegetables, was Juliet, a girl who had once been one of the Cape family's housemaids. Dorothy blinked, shame flooding her face. "Juliet?" Juliet gasped, nearly dropping her groceries. "What happened to you? You look nothing like yourself." Dorothy burst into tears, covering her face. "Papa's business is gone. The banks took everything. I have nowhere to go. Juliet, I'm starving." Juliet stared at her in disbelief. Just weeks ago, Dorothy had sacked her in front of all the other workers, calling her a waste of space. Now the same Dorothy Cape was begging her for food. Life truly had a wicked sense of humour. Juliet sighed, shaking her head. "This is not normal. Rich people don't just become broke overnight. Something is wrong somewhere." Still, she handed Dorothy some bread and a bottle of water. Dorothy grabbed them with shaky hands and ate like someone who hadn't seen food in months. Juliet just watched quietly, her mind turning. "Dorothy," Juliet finally said, "think carefully. What exactly happened before your father lost everything? Did you or your family do something unusual?" Dorothy frowned, chewing slowly. "They said it was investment fraud. Some London firm tricked Papa." Juliet leaned closer. "Fraud? Think harder. Sometimes what looks like fraud in the physical is punishment in the spiritual. Was there anything strange you did? Dorothy froze. For a moment her mind flashed back. The old woman, the puddle, the laughter, her phone camera recording. She swallowed hard. There was an old woman. Dorothy whispered. I splashed dirty water on her, and I laughed. Juliet's eyes widened. You what, Dorothy? That's not just disrespect. That's dangerous. You don't know who that woman was. You think she cursed me? Dorothy asked, panic in her eyes. Juliet crossed her arms. I don't think, I know. You need answers, and there's only one person who can give them. Baba, the seer. The next morning, Juliet dragged Dorothy to Mushin, to a small, shabby house that smelled of herbs and incense. Inside sat Baba, a frail old man with eyes sharper than an eagle's. He didn't even greet Dorothy. He just stared at her like she was already a book he'd read cover to cover. Finally, he spoke. His voice was slow but heavy, like thunder wrapped in silk. I see darkness all over you, child. You carry a curse. Dorothy's lips trembled. A curse? Yes, Baba said firmly. You mocked one who is not ordinary. The spirits of the earth rise to defend the weak. That is why your father's wealth disappeared like smoke. The punishment is not coincidence, it is judgment. Dorothy shook her head wildly. But I didn't kill anyone. I just splashed water. Baba's eyes narrowed. Sometimes the greatest crimes are not murder or theft. Sometimes the greatest sins are how we treat those who cannot fight back. Juliet shifted uncomfortably. Baba, can the curse be removed? The old man sighed. Not by me. Only the one who was wronged can forgive. If the woman you mocked forgives you sincerely, the curse will be lifted. If not... He let the silence hang in the air like a death sentence. For the first time since losing everything, Dorothy felt a spark of hope. Her voice cracked. Then I must find her. I'll beg on my knees if I have to. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. But deep inside, one thought haunted her. What if the old woman never forgave her? Dorothy Cape spent the next week wandering Lagos like a shadow of herself. Gone was the billionaire's daughter with designer bags and high heels. What remained was a broken girl in torn clothes, smelling like old sweat and street dust. Every morning, she dragged herself back to the exact spot where she had once splashed that old woman with muddy water. She asked passers-by, shopkeepers and hawkers, but most people didn't even bother answering her. To them, she wasn't Miss Cape anymore. She was just another street beggar asking questions nobody cared about. Her hair was tangled, her nails dirty, and her once beautiful face was now hardened by hunger. People looked past her like she was invisible. The same people who once bowed to her father's name now wouldn't even lend her a smile. Finally, on the 7th day, a young newspaper vendor stopped to listen. His name was Toba, a slim boy with restless eyes who seemed too sharp for his age. There's one old woman like that, Toba said slowly, adjusting the pile of papers under his arm. We call her Mama Coco. She lives in Bagada and passes here every day to go to the market. Poor woman, but everybody respects her. She helps people even though she barely has anything herself. Dorothy's heart leapt. That's her. That has to be her. Please, Toba, take me there. I swear on my life, if this works out, I'll pay you once my problems are solved. Toba squinted at her muddy sandals and ragged clothes. Pay me? Well, let's see first. Come on. They boarded a rusty Danfo bus that smelled of sweat and roasted groundnuts, heading toward Jibagada, the slum Dorothy had only heard of in passing, usually as a joke at rich people parties. When they arrived, Dorothy nearly gagged. The smell hit her first. Stale water, fish and human waste all mixed together. Then the sight. Houses built on water with rotten wood and patched up zinc sheets. Kids with no shoes splashed around in dark, dirty water as if it was normal. Women cooked by the roadside while men sat fixing nets or carrying loads. Toba smirked at her expression. Looks like this is your first time here, Princess. Dorothy didn't reply. She was too busy covering her nose with her hand. They walked through narrow wooden planks until they reached a cluster of people gathered in front of a small shack. Some were crying, others murmuring quietly. The atmosphere was heavy. Toba stopped a young woman standing nearby. "What's happening?" The woman sighed deeply. "It's Mama Coco. She passed away last night. She was a good woman, always helping everyone, even though she herself had nothing. We're preparing for her burial." Dorothy felt the ground spin beneath her. Her knees buckled and she gripped Toba's arm. "What? Dead? No, she can't be dead. I need her. I need to talk to her." Her voice cracked as she screamed, "She has to forgive me. She has to." The crowd turned to look at her strangely. "Did you know Mama Coco?" someone asked, confused. Toba quickly pulled Dorothy away. "Sorry, she's not well. Don't mind her," he whispered to the onlookers before dragging her down a side path. When they were out of sight, Dorothy broke down completely. She told Toba everything, how she had humiliated Mama Coco with the dirty water, how she had mocked her, and how her life collapsed the very next day. Toba listened silently, his face unreadable. Finally, he said, "Dorothy, you were cruel, very cruel. You had everything and still found joy in mocking someone who had nothing. Now the universe has balanced it, but it's too late to fix it." Her tears poured freely as they made their way back to Mushin to see Baba, the seer. The old man stared at Dorothy for a long time when she told him what had happened. His face grew darker with every word. Finally, he shook his head slowly, like someone pronouncing a death sentence. "Then it is finished," he said. "The curse cannot be lifted. Only Mama Coco could have forgiven you. Now she has gone to the ancestors with the memory of your wickedness still burning in her heart." Dorothy collapsed to her knees, clutching the hem of his robe. "Please, there must be another way. I'll fast. I'll pray. I'll crawl on the ground if I have to. Tell me what to do." Baba pulled his garment free. His voice was cold, almost final. "There is nothing. The spiritual world does not negotiate once the wronged has crossed to the other side. You and your father will remain as you are, stripped of wealth, treated like dust, invisible to those who once bowed to you. This is your punishment." Dorothy screamed in despair. "But I only splashed her with water. I didn't kill her." The old man's eyes flashed. "Sometimes the deadliest wounds are not of the body, but of the heart. You mocked her spirit. You crushed her dignity. That is why the spirits rose against you." Dorothy lay on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time in her life, she realized that money couldn't buy forgiveness, and pride couldn't erase consequences. The princess of wealth had become the beggar of mercy, and there was no mercy left to give. Months rolled by like punishment on repeat. Cape Sammy, once the almighty billionaire who could shut down half of Lagos with a single phone call, came back from London, but not as the man he left. The once boastful lion returned home looking like a drenched stray cat. And what did he meet? His precious jewel, Dorothy Cape, his only daughter, begging for food on the same streets where chauffeurs once dropped her with designer handbags swinging from her arm. Father and daughter were now united by shame. They slept in abandoned buildings with rats as neighbours, begged for coins that never came, and ate leftovers people wouldn't even feed their dogs. The same friends who used to fight for a seat at their dinner table now crossed the road like Dorothy and her father were lepers. Business partners? Ha! These were the same men who used to send Christmas hampers worth millions. Now they acted as if Cape Sammy never existed. Dorothy learned hunger, real hunger. Not the fake kind where you say, "I'm starving," while waiting for your pizza to arrive. No. This was the kind of hunger that made her stomach bite itself and her eyes spin. She learned shame, the kind where people laugh at your torn clothes and security guards bundle you away from the very boutiques where you once shopped with arrogance. One night, they shared a tiny piece of bread, hard, stale, the kind even birds would reject. As they chewed in silence, Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her father and whispered, "Papa, forgive me. All this, it's my fault." Cape Sammy frowned. "Your fault? What are you saying, Dorothy?" And then she confessed. The dirty water, the laughter, the old woman with sad eyes, the curse Baba had confirmed. She poured it all out, shaking like the cold wind blowing through the broken windows of their hideout. Her father listened without interrupting. His face was stone, but his eyes, those tired, fallen eyes, were oceans of regret. Finally he spoke. I always raised you to believe we were better than everyone else because we had money. That was my mistake. Money doesn't make you better. How you treat others, that's what makes you human. Dorothy sobbed. But Papa, isn't it too late? Mama Coco is gone. The curse can't be undone. Sammy exhaled slowly. Maybe this is the lesson we were meant to learn. Maybe we had to lose everything before we could find our humanity. And just like that, silence swallowed them again. Years crawled past. Dorothy and her father became walking headlines, the once untouchable billionaire family now reduced to Lagos beggars. Some pitied them, some mocked them, and others simply ignored them like trash on the roadside. But every night, Dorothy's mind went back to that one moment. That splash of dirty water, that old woman's weary eyes, eyes that carried dignity, Dorothy never understood until now. Mama Coco had walked away poor, but with grace. Dorothy now understood what true wealth looked like, but the revelation came too late. The curse had sealed its lesson. The Capes, who once sat on gold, were now buried under dust. Once they owned everything, mansions, companies, respect. Now they owned nothing but regret. One fateful morning, tragedy came knocking again. The estate management had finally decided to demolish all the old abandoned sheds where squatters hid. Sadly, one of those sheds had become the only home Dorothy Cape and her father, Cape Sammy, had left. That morning, the sound of footsteps and angry voices jolted them awake. A group of youths stormed in, holding iron rods and sticks. "Everybody out! We are clearing this place today," one of them shouted. Dorothy and her father fell to their knees instantly, tears rushing down their faces. "Please, don't send us away," Cape Sammy begged. "We have nowhere else to go." "Please," Dorothy cried, clutching her torn dress. "Just allow us to stay here, even if it's just this one shed. We've lost everything." But the young men were unmoved. "Out!" they barked. "This is not a charity home." As father and daughter wailed, fate twisted the knife deeper. A sleek car pulled up beside them, and out stepped a young lady, her aura screaming wealth and education. She walked toward the scene with curiosity, only to stop in shock when she saw Dorothy and her father on their knees. "What's going on here?" she asked sharply. "Why are they embarrassing themselves like this?" One of the thugs spat on the ground. "Don't pity them, madam. These are the wicked ones who killed that poor old woman, Mama Coco, by mocking and humiliating her before she died." The young woman froze. Her voice shook. "Wait, what did you just say? Mama Coco? The same Mama Coco that lived in Bagada?" The thugs all nodded without hesitation, and in that instant the girl's legs gave way. Tears burst out of her eyes like rain. No, not you," she cried, pointing at Dorothy and her father. "So you're the ones who killed my grandmother." Dorothy collapsed forward, grabbing the girl's feet, sobbing uncontrollably. Please forgive me. I was foolish. I was cruel. I didn't know. Please, don't hate me. I beg you in God's name, forgive me." Hours later, the chaos had calmed, and they sat together in a quiet park nearby. Dorothy still knelt before the young lady, her face streaked with tears, while Cape Sammy sat broken, staring into the air. The young woman finally spoke, her voice trembling. "My name is Isabel Coco. Mama Coco was my grandmother. After I lost my parents, she was the only one who stood for me. That poor woman you mocked and humiliated was the same woman who sold firewood and did menial jobs just to send me abroad for school. She gave up everything for me, and I promised her I'd come back and give her the good life she deserved." Dorothy's sobs grew louder. "Please, Isabel, I am sorry. I didn't know." Isabel's tears rolled as she continued. "Life abroad was tough. I struggled, I cried, I almost gave up. But I kept going because I wanted to make Grandma proud. By the time I finally made it and returned 6 months ago, they told me she had died. And not just died. She died after being disgraced, humiliated, mocked in public by you. She turned her face away, crying like a child. Do you know how it feels to succeed, only to come home and realize the one person you worked for, the one person who gave you life, was buried with pain in her heart? You destroyed her dignity. You killed her spirit before death came. Dorothy clung tighter to Isabel's legs. Please, please, forgive me. I was young, stupid, arrogant. Don't let my foolishness destroy me forever. Isabel wiped her tears slowly, her eyes blazing with both grief and anger, while Cape Sammy, the once mighty billionaire, now sat looking like a sack of shame. His lips trembled as he finally found his voice. My daughter has told you the truth, he began slowly. We have paid for our cruelty. We have begged for crumbs on the same streets where people once bowed to us. We have been spat on, chased, mocked, and forgotten. Do you know what it means for a man who once signed million-dollar deals to now fight with street dogs for leftover bread? That has been my reality. My pride, my name, my empire, everything has been ground to dust. If pain could be measured, then I and my daughter have already drowned in an ocean of it. His voice broke, and for the first time since the chaos began, tears rolled down his wrinkled cheeks. He grabbed Isabel's hands. My daughter was foolish, yes, but please, for the sake of your grandmother's soul, forgive her. Forgive us. Isabel wept quietly. The sight of the once feared Cape Sammy grovelling like a beggar pierced her heart. After what felt like an eternity, she exhaled sharply, wiped her tears, and spoke, All right, I forgive you both, but forgiveness is not just words. It requires action. You must join me to give my grandmother the proper burial she deserved. Together we will appease her spirit. Only then can this curse that ruined your lives be lifted. Dorothy screamed in relief, hugging Isabel's knees. Thank you, thank you. We will do everything you say. 2 weeks later, the burial preparations began. The forgotten woman, Mama Coco, who once lived and died in poverty, was given the kind of funeral only queens receive. The coffin was polished mahogany, the crowd filled with faces from Lagos high society, and the once mighty Capes, now humbled, sat in the front row, wailing like children. Dorothy cried uncontrollably as she placed flowers on the casket. Cape Sammy wept so hard people whispered, Is this really the great Cape Sammy that used to throw parties with champagne fountains? At the graveside, Isabel stood tall, dressed in black, her voice breaking as she spoke to her grandmother. Grandma, forgive them. They mocked you. They broke you. But today they bow before your spirit. I beg you, let go of the pain. Rest in peace and let your anger return to the earth. The atmosphere was so heavy that even the wind seemed to pause. Some swore they felt a strange calm sweep through the air, as though Mama Coco herself had accepted the apology. The next morning, a miracle, or rather a scandal, struck. Cape Sammy's phone, which hadn't rung for months except for debt collectors, suddenly buzzed. He stared at the number in disbelief. London? He muttered, almost dropping it. He answered cautiously. Hello. Mr. Cape, this is Harrison and Associates, the voice said. We owe you an apology. There was an internal fraud in our London branch that caused the loss of your funds. The culprits have been caught, and your accounts have been fully restored. We will also compensate you for damages. Cape Sammy froze. He thought maybe he was hallucinating from hunger. Say that again, he whispered. In fact, sir, the man continued, your balance now stands higher than it did before. We are sending the documents and transfers immediately. Congratulations. Click. Cape Sammy stared at the phone like it had just turned into gold. Dorothy, he screamed. It's back! Everything is back! Dorothy thought her father had finally lost his mind. Papa, what's back? Your memory? Your senses? She snapped sarcastically. But when the email came in, showing figures so high it made her dizzy, Dorothy fainted flat on the floor. Within 1 month, the Capes were restored to their former glory, and more. The cars returned, the mansions opened, and the same people who once crossed the street to avoid them were now lining up at their gates again. The gossip spread like wildfire. "Have you heard? Cape Sammy is back! The gods have lifted the curse." Ironically, the same mouths that mocked Dorothy now called her Princess Dorothy again, and Dorothy, rolling her eyes, would sometimes whisper to herself, if hypocrisy were a disease, Lagos would need a hospital bigger than the stadium. But one thing had changed forever. Dorothy Cape and her father no longer walked with pride dripping from their noses. They walked with scars. They walked with humility. And deep inside, Dorothy knew all the cars, the houses, and the money meant nothing compared to the dignity of one poor old woman who had died with pain in her heart. This time she swore she would never repeat the mistake of mocking the weak. 2 years later, Lagos woke up to a piece of news that nobody saw coming. Dorothy Cape, the same girl who once splashed dirty water on an old woman, was now launching a charity foundation. The name? Mama Coco Memorial Home for the Needy. When the press release dropped, people nearly choked on their account. "What, Dorothy Cape? Charity?" one trader scoffed. "Is this the same Dorothy that once called beggars street decorations? I beg, who they deceive who?" But when the gates finally opened, everyone's jaws dropped. The foundation was no joke. It wasn't some flimsy PR stunt where billionaires throw a few bags of rice and pose for Instagram. No, this was big, massive. Dorothy and her father had built an actual home for the poor, with dormitories, a clinic, classrooms, kitchens that served hot meals daily, and even a skill acquisition centre. It was designed to give dignity back to the very people Dorothy once mocked. At the opening ceremony, Dorothy stood on stage, microphone in hand, her voice surprisingly steady. "This is not charity," she began, scanning the crowd. "This is redemption. Months ago, I was the type of person who thought money gave me wings. But when those wings burned, I fell flat on the streets. And in that fall, I learned that the people we ignore, the weak, the poor, the ones we think are nothing, are the very reason humanity still exists." The crowd went silent. "My foundation is named after Mama Coco," she continued, her eyes misty. "The woman I wronged, the woman whose dignity in pain has taught me more than wealth ever did. If she were alive today, I would be kneeling before her. But since she's gone, this is my way of kneeling for the poor she left behind." Some journalists swore they saw Cape Sammy himself wiping his eyes discreetly with a handkerchief. The transformation was shocking. Dorothy, who once couldn't stand the sight of dust, was now personally serving food to street children. She walked into the kitchens, into the hostels, laughing with widows and carrying babies on her hips. Of course, people whispered, "Ah, wonders shall never end. The billionaire's daughter is carrying a poor man's baby like it's Gucci handbag." But Dorothy didn't care. Instead of flaunting diamonds, she now flaunted smiles. Instead of mocking beggars, she now built houses for them. And for the first time in her life, when people looked at her, they didn't just see a billionaire's daughter. They saw a woman with a purpose. Mama Coco's name, once buried in shame, now shone across Lagos. Billboards read, "Mama Coco Memorial Home for the Needy, where dignity lives again." And this time, Dorothy didn't laugh at anyone's pain. She helped heal it. At first, people thought Dorothy's foundation was just another rich girl guilt project. Something she would get bored of once the cameras stopped flashing. But Dorothy shocked the city. Instead of fading away, the Mama Coco Memorial Home for the Needy exploded like wildfire. Within months, donations poured in from everywhere. Ordinary market women dropped 500, students donated coins, and foreign investors who had once turned their backs on the Capes were now calling every day to support. "Funny, isn't it?" Dorothy chuckled to her father one evening. "When we had billions, people only wanted to eat with us. But now that we're feeding the poor, they want to invest in us. Life is truly sarcastic." Cape Sammy only shook his head, smiling faintly. He knew his daughter had become a different woman. one he was proud of. The foundation built schools in Ajagunle, free clinics in Mushin, boreholes in remote villages, and vocational centres across Lagos. Young men who once wandered the streets jobless were now learning trades. Widows who had been abandoned now had homes. Orphans who had nothing now called the foundation Mama Coco's house. Before long, Mama Coco's name was being spoken in the same breath as the great philanthropists of history. And here came the shocker. The foundation's reach became so powerful that it started attracting more trust than Cape Sammy's oil companies ever did. While Sammy had once been known as the billionaire oil mogul, now people said, Cape family? Those are the people changing lives. The ultimate twist came 1 year later. Forbes Africa released its annual list. Everyone expected to see Cape Sammy's oil empire in the top 10, as usual. But instead, the headline read, "The Mama Coco Foundation now ranked as Africa's largest humanitarian empire." Bigger than Cape Oil, bigger than his banks, bigger than every business he had built. Cape Sammy sat staring at the magazine in shock. He laughed until tears rolled down his face. "Dorothy, do you see this? My life's empire was oil and banks. Yours is people. You've built something I could never dream of." Dorothy only smiled, her voice soft. "Papa, maybe this was God's plan all along. Your wealth fed our pride. But this one feeds the world." And so the Cape legacy was rewritten. No longer remembered as the billionaires who lost everything, they became known as the family who turned pain into hope. Dorothy's name was carved into history, not as a spoiled heiress, but as the woman who carried Mama Coco's dignity on her shoulders and built an empire of compassion. And Mama Coco, the poor old woman who once walked with a stick and a faded wrapper, became immortal. Her spirit now lived in every classroom, every meal served, every roof built for the forgotten. For the first time, the Capes had more than wealth. They had purpose. They had redemption. They had a legacy. And this time, it was unshakable. Hello, beloved viewers. Sometimes life breaks us, not to destroy us, but to redirect us. The Cape family lost their empire, but in that loss they discovered a legacy far greater than money, a legacy of compassion. Mama Coco may be gone, but through Dorothy's foundation, her spirit still feeds the hungry, shelters the homeless, and gives hope to the hopeless. And that, my dear besties, is the true wealth of life. Not what we keep, but what we give. Don't forget to like, share, and comment in your own language. Tell me, what do you think? Is wealth sweeter when it builds castles or when it builds lives? Until next time, stay blessed.